After taking on a substitute class to make some extra money, I didn't think much of it. It was just another boring afternoon where someone in the group chat offered 3 back-to-back lectures, and I was the first to jump in with the me. Because, well, rent exists. I asked for the name and class code, like usual, and showed up 10 minutes early with my English homework in hand, thinking I'd knock that out while the teacher mumbled in the background. Rumor had it the usual professor for this course never took attendance, so I had no reason to be nervous until a woman walked into the room instead of the expected chill male lecturer. She dropped her toad on the desk, started plugging in her laptop, and I stared at the time and room number again like that would magically make her disappear. I leaned over to the girl next to me and whispered, "Wasn't this class supposed to be taught by a guy?" She blinked at the woman, confused. "Yeah, he usually teaches this. Maybe he swapped last minute." My stomach turned. Then the woman cleared her throat and said, "Professor Carter had some personal matters today, so I'm taking over. I'll start with roll call." Roll call? What do you mean roll call? I glanced back at the group chat details. The name I was supposed to respond to was Ryan Carter. I mean, how was I supposed to know that Ryan Carter was a guy? The teacher called out, "Ryan Carter," and for a second, I froze. Then I raised my hand like it was muscle memory. She looked up, eyes narrowing slightly, and then frowned.
Huh.
I thought Ryan Carter was a boy. I nudged the girl beside me again and mouthed, "Ryan Carter is a boy." She gave me the worst possible nod ever and whispered back, "Yup. He's the basketball captain. Kind of famous on campus."
Great.
Just great. I was literally impersonating someone half the university probably idolized. But then my brain kicked into crisis mode. I sighed dramatically, lowered my eyes, and said softly, "I'm his girlfriend. He's sick today and didn't want to miss class, so I came to take notes for him." The teacher looked at me for a long beat, then smiled. "I see. All right." I thought I got away with it until she added casually, "Don't leave after class. I'd like to speak with you." That "I'd like to speak with you" hit harder than any exam ever had. I spent the next 90 minutes sweating bullets, pretending to be engaged, while frantically Googling her name on the school website. Turns out the woman standing at the podium was none other than Professor Emily Carter, one of the strictest, most no-nonsense faculty members on campus. Known for her zero-tolerance policy on skipping class or academic dishonesty. I nearly passed out. I texted Ryan immediately. "Hey. Big problem. I think I'm screwed." His reply was almost instant. "What happened?" I told him the teacher swapped. He asked, "Is it a woman?" I said, "Yeah. She's strict as hell too. Said she wants to talk after class." There was a long pause before his next message popped up. "That's my mom." I stared at the screen, then at the podium, then back at the screen. Mom. No wonder she looked so familiar. I felt every bone in my body lock up. And then, because he's clearly out of his mind, he added, "No problem." What do you mean, no problem? But he said it so confidently, I had no choice but to keep going. During the next break, I tried gathering information like a real girlfriend would. I asked around about Ryan trying to build a profile. Turns out he's a total basketball nerd. Apparently, he lives and breathes the sport, barely skips class, and this was the first time he missed one due to a tournament clash. So yeah, not only was I was lying on behalf of the golden boy. After class, Professor Carter turned to me and said, "Ryan's girlfriend, follow me." I did what any self-preserving human would do, followed. We got to her office, and she actually pulled out a chair for me. "Don't be shy, sit." Yeah, no way I was sitting. I stood awkwardly and tried to look less guilty than I felt. She smiled, probably enjoying this way too much. "What's your name?" "Claire Bennett," I replied quickly. "Which department?" "Foreign languages, sophomore year." "What are your hobbies?" Concerts." She nodded like she was mentally checking off a list. "Is Ryan the same year as you?" "Yes." "He's a good boy," she said thoughtfully. "Does he treat you well? Ever been mean to you?" I blinked. Was this a trap? "No, he's great. Very caring. Super respectful." She smiled with obvious satisfaction. "Good. Then come have dinner with us tonight. I thought she was joking. She was not. I looked at her in horror, and she just smiled like she knew I'd say yes. You can't say no, she added, or he'll fail the course.
So yeah.
That's how I ended up being kidnapped into the Carter household, hand in hand with Ryan's mom. She was surprisingly warm and chatty, asking me all sorts of questions. Ryan has his flaws, you know. Gets moody when he loses a game. If he's mean to you, just tell me. Lady, I don't even know your son. I nodded along, fake smiling the whole time. Yes, ma'am. Got it. She paused mid-sentence. Don't call me ma'am. Call me auntie.
Oh God.
This was spiraling. Once inside, she gave me a full tour of the house and pointed at the family photo wall. I finally saw Ryan in person, smiling in some basketball pic. He looked vaguely familiar. And then it hit me I'd seen him on the court before. My roommate had a massive crush on some guy from the basketball team, and I'd tag along a few times. I even remembered one particular match where our department lost terribly, and a stray ball nearly took me and my roommate out. He was the one who caught it midair and asked if we were okay. My roommate had swooned right then and there. He's so hot, she'd whispered. Way cuter than anyone from our major. I agreed, then promptly forgot about him. Until now. Auntie Professor Carter pointed at a photo of toddler Ryan in open-crotch pants. I mean, full baby exposure. And as if that wasn't bad enough, she moved the magnetic sticker covering the embarrassing part and said, I won't tell him I showed you. I was traumatized. Then, like a cruel twist of fate, the front door opened. Oh, good, Auntie said. That must be Ryan. Go open the door for him. Me. But she was already pushing me toward it. When I opened the door, Ryan stood there, holding a basketball under his arm, drenched in post-practice sweat. He looked at me like I was a ghost. Then checked the house number. This is the right place? I smiled and said, Nice to meet you. Hello, boyfriend. His eyebrows shot up before he quickly composed himself. Auntie peeked up behind me and said proudly, Surprise. Your girlfriend covered class for you today. So I invited her over. Ryan caught on immediately.
Mom.
You should have told me. I wasn't ready. Then he pulled me inside and acted like this was all normal. My eyes nearly rolled out of my skull. But he was smooth too smooth. And weirdly, I didn't hate it. Ryan led me inside like we'd been dating for years, and honestly, the way he pulled it off so effortlessly made me wonder how many fake girlfriends he'd gone through before me, but judging by his mom's enthusiasm, probably none lucky me, I guess. The moment we stepped into the living room, Auntie, yes, I was already calling her that now, practically shoved us toward the giant family photo wall like she'd been waiting her whole life to give someone a full Carter family backstory. There were pictures of Ryan in every possible stage of life. Elementary school with a missing tooth, middle school all tan and sweaty from basketball, high school grinning awkwardly in a suit. And then there it was, the infamous open-crotch baby photo again. Auntie pointed at it like it was a national treasure, moved the little magnet away, and whispered, Just a quick peek, I won't tell him. Mom, I mean, Auntie, why are you like this? I was still reeling from that visual when the front door opened and Ryan stepped in, wiping sweat from his brow with the back of his hand, basketball still tucked at his hip, like it was glued there. He froze when he saw me, scanned the living room like he wasn't sure what dimension he'd entered, then whispered, This has to be the right house. I gave him a little wave and said, Nice to meet you, boyfriend. He blinked once, looked like he might laugh, and then Annie joined us and spilled the whole story about how she invited me over when she found out I went to class for him. Ryan, bless his improv skills, played along without missing a beat. Mom, you brought Claire over without warning me? I wasn't prepared at all. And just like that, we were co-actors in a romantic comedy neither of us auditioned for. When Auntie disappeared into the kitchen humming some 80s love song, Ryan tugged me aside and whispered, Okay, we need to sync our stories fast. She's not just a professor, she's the FBI with tenure. I barely had time to blink before he was in my chat zone contact list, changing my name to Claire Redheart and sending me a heart emoji. He glanced at my phone screen, frowned, and said, Change my name too. It'll look weird if you haven't. I hesitated for half a second and muttered, "That'll cost extra." He just smirked and said, "Fine," and on my screen, his contact name became Xian Xian Two Hearts, like we were in some cheesy rom-com. Then he leaned against the kitchen wall and began outlining our fake love story, like he'd written the script himself. "We've been together 5 months," he said confidently. "I saw you during a game, blocked a stray ball for you, and fell in love at first sight." I raised a brow. "Wait, you blocked the ball, and you fell in love at first sight? Shouldn't I be the one love struck?" He tilted his head like I had a point, nodded solemnly. "You're right. I'll be the only one who fell in love at first sight."
Ugh.
The audacity. I let him win that round. We paced around the house looking for a place to take a couple photo that didn't scream, "This was taken 5 minutes ago," but failed miserably. So he pulled out his phone and started scrolling through old game photos, muttering, "You said you watched every game, right?" I nodded, and he smirked again. "Then I'm sure you're in here somewhere." A few minutes later, he found me in the blurry background of several shots, sitting on the bleachers with my roommate. "Perfect," he beamed. "Now we have proof. I'll print them later and sneak them onto the photo wall." I was still recovering from that when he turned and locked eyes with the open-crotch baby photo, his smile evaporating. In an instant, he dove toward it, moved the magnet back in place at lightning speed, and looked at me with a flushed face. "You didn't see anything, did you?" I was standing behind him, and technically no, I didn't just see it. I saw it earlier with Annie, but telling him that would kill him on the spot. So I said, "Nope. I saw nothing. Absolutely nothing at all. Except maybe when I was a kid, but not since I grew up." The words left my mouth before I could stop them, and we both froze. He looked down at his own sweatpants, and then straight up panicked. "Yubathrum. Now." And he ran. I stood there, mortified, wondering if I'd just triggered some irreversible trauma. I tried to play it cool by walking over to the window and cracking it open for some air, but I was literally burning with secondhand embarrassment. Auntie peeked out from the kitchen with a bowl of soup and asked sweetly, "Where's Ryan?" I gave her the fakest smile of my life and replied, "Bathroom." "Oh," she said with a knowing smirk. "Why is your face so red? Did you clean your gun?" I was about to die. I was 100% sure Ryan heard that because he came out a second later and grabbed her by the elbow. "Mom, you can't say stuff like that." She just laughed. Okay, I'll behave. Kids these days are so sensitive." Then she went back to cooking like she hadn't just dropped the most unhinged euphemism ever. Ryan and I were left alone on the couch. He hugged a pillow like it was shielding him from further embarrassment and motioned for me to sit beside him. "So," I asked, trying to lighten the mood, "how was the game today?" That one question opened the floodgates. He launched into a full post-game rant about dirty fouls and sketchy refs, his eyes lighting up with that basketball player glow. I listened, half smiling, and for a moment forgot this entire relationship was built on a single lie. That is, until the front door opened and a deep voice echoed from the hallway. "I'm home." My heart stopped. Ryan Stadaka, Professor David Carter, the scariest professor in the School of Global Languages, was home. I stood up instinctively and said in the tiniest voice ever, "Good evening, Professor Carter." His eyes widened like he just saw a UFO. "Claire Bennett? What are you doing here?" "You Auntie invited me." "Auntie," he echoed, eyes flickering between me and Ryan. Ryan stepped in like a human shield and said, "Dad, this is my girlfriend, Claire." Professor Carter looked like he'd just been told the dog was driving the car. "You mean the same Claire I lectured last week for not citing MLA correctly?" I nodded slowly, unsure if this was a nightmare. "Sir, I've improved since then." He chuckled, to my surprise. "Just don't take it out on my son, all right?" "Actually, I kind of yell at him more than he yells at me," I said, trying to joke. Ryan looked proud.
See?
"I'm happy to be yelled at. It means she cares." I wanted to melt into the couch and disappear. But then Andy called us to dinner, and all thoughts of dying vanished the second I saw the food. Real, home-cooked food. Heaven. I dug in shamelessly. barely pausing to breathe. Ryan served me water, passed dishes, even rubbed my back gently when I choked on a dumpling. Auntie and Professor Carter stared at me like I was a starving orphan. "Ryan," Annie said suddenly, "how long have you been neglecting this poor girl? Look at her, she's famished." Ryan glanced at me, whispering, "Please stop eating. They're going to kill me." Professor Carter, ever the drama king, pushed his rice into my bowl and said warmly, "Eat as much as you want, Claire." And just like that, I became famous in the Carter household for inhaling one meal. After that night, Ryan kept inviting me to games, and I kept saying yes. Slowly, I forgot that this started as a cover story, and somehow started believing it was real. Every moment with him, every fake date, every shared look, every bickering whisper during class blurred the lines between pretending and wanting. And yet, neither of us had the guts to say it out loud. Were we still acting, or were we just too scared to admit it wasn't fake anymore? It's wild how pretending to date someone can somehow feel more real than any actual relationship I've ever been in, like the kind where you know it's a game but your heart didn't get the memo, and suddenly every shared glance, every coincidental shoulder touch, every post-basketball hug starts to mean something it was never supposed to, or maybe it was, and we were just too afraid to admit it. But either way, ever since that dinner with his parents, Ryan started walking me to class more often, even the ones he wasn't in, especially when his leg was still healing and I offered to help him switch buildings because the campus was a maze and he limped like a stubborn Labrador refusing to admit it was injured. And on those walks, we laughed about stupid things, like how Annie tried to serve boiled ginseng soup for young vitality. Or how Professor Carter watched me like a hawk during class but still smiled whenever I handed in my essays early, and somewhere between those moments and his fingers brushing against mine, something shifted, like my heart started pacing every time he got too close or said my name too softly. And yet, despite the fact that we texted daily, studied together, swapped snacks like a married couple, we still hadn't defined whatever the hell we were, and maybe that was fine, until one of our professors, the same Professor Carter, mind you, called on me in the middle of a lecture and said with a perfectly straight face, "Claire Bennett, since you and Mr. Carter are apparently inseparable, I'd like you to come to the front and give a quick report on your current romantic relationship." And my soul literally tried to leave my body, because what kind of teacher uses your fake boyfriend against you like that? But Ryan just smirked from his seat, leaned back with that smug, "I can't wait to see how you get out of this" expression. And I, being the disaster I am, stood up, walked to the podium, took a deep breath, and said in the most awkward formal English I could muster, "My emotional state is stable. My boyfriend is a hardworking computer science student who makes me feel valued." And now, to elaborate on our mutual academic influences, please welcome Ryan Carter for a brief lecture on system architecture. And I gestured to him like we were on some cheesy morning talk show, and he looked stunned for all of 3 seconds before recovering, grabbing the USB stick from his backpack and walking up like we had planned this months in advance, pulling up a half-finished project slide and explaining logic gates in English, while Professor Carter watched us both like a man, trying not to smile during a funeral. And I don't know what possessed Ryan, but he ended his presentation by looking directly at me and saying, "In conclusion, I love my girlfriend very much." And the class went silent before exploding in chaos, and right then, Professor Carter slammed his notebook shut and said, "You're both completely off topic." And we stood there side by side like 2 kids waiting to be scolded, shoulders stiff, trying not to laugh. And Ryan whispered to me, "Is he always like this?" And I nodded so fast my neck cracked. "Yes, he is." And then whack, his father smacked the board pointer against the desk like it was a gavel, and Ryan flinched so hard it looked like he got hit, and the second time actually landed on his hip, and I couldn't help but laugh, which of course got me a pointer slap too. And the next thing we knew, we were kicked out of class and told to reflect outside. So we stood outside the lecture hall, leaning against the wall like 2 expelled middle schoolers, and after a moment of silence, he turned to me and said, "Let's ditch." And I, the honor student, the girl who never skips class, said no 3 times before finally muttering, "Only because you're hurt and can't stand too long." And off we went, holding hands as we headed for the playground. his limp slowing us down but neither of us really caring. And he asked if I was coming over for dinner again, and I said no because I'd gained weight, to which he pinched my cheek and said, "Chubby is cute," and my heart full-on did a flip, not because of the words, but because it was the first time he touched me like that gently, without performance, not in front of his parents or to prove anything, just casually and sincerely, and for a second I froze because it felt too real, too intimate, and he must have noticed because he stiffened too, asking softly, "Did I go too far?" But I shook my head and pinched him back, muttering, "You'll miss the game if we keep standing here." And so we walked to the court, and I took my usual spot on the bleachers with a towel and bottle of water, like some dedicated team manager, even though I wasn't on the roster, because Ryan always said he needed me there, and I believed him until my heart stopped mid-game when Ethan Miller, a guy from our department who I barely knew, ran up to me, panting, and said, "Claire, Professor Carter wants to see you in his office." And instantly my chest tightened, because what if he was mad we skipped? Or what if someone reported us? But something didn't feel right, so I asked, "Did he say why?" And Ethan shrugged. "No clue. He just said to come now." And as we hurried toward the academic building, I took out my phone and checked for messages. Nothing from Professor Carter, nothing from the department, but then I made the mistake of checking Ryan's phone, which was in his coat by the bench, and that's when I saw it, a message from an unknown number with the words, "Baby, I'm here too. Watch you play pleading face sparkling heart." And my stomach dropped, hands trembling because what the hell was that? And before I could stop myself, I swiped to see more, and there it was, a photo of a girl with Ryan, their faces close, clearly taken at another time, and my heart shattered just a little right then because even if we weren't official, even if we were pretending, I'd started to believe it, and now, suddenly, I wasn't sure what any of it meant anymore, and I shoved the phone back into the pocket and followed Ethan in a daze, my thoughts spinning and vision blurry. But when we reached the office door, something didn't add up. Why would Professor Carter send someone else when he could have just messaged me directly, especially when he had my number, especially when he always pulled me aside himself unless it was a setup. But before I could process any of that, Ethan turned to me and said, "Claire, I like you. I think I'm a better fit for you than Ryan is," and I blinked at him, unable to feel anything except exhaustion, and I said, "Thanks, but I don't belong to anyone. You liking me doesn't mean I owe you anything." And with that, I walked past him and turned back toward the court, needing to see Ryan, needing to hear the truth from him. But halfway there, someone called out, "Claire. Claire, wait, Ryan's hurt." And my feet left the ground because no, not now. And I sprinted back to the court where he sat on the floor, clutching his knee, face twisted in pain, and yet when he saw me, his expression cracked and his eyes welled up like a little boy who'd been waiting too long, and the moment I knelt beside him, he didn't say a word, just wrapped his arms around me like I was the only thing keeping him from falling apart, and I felt it, not just the physical pain, but the fear, the regret, the panic in the way he held me tighter, whispering, "It hurt, yeah, but seeing you walk away with him, that hurt worse." And when he finally let go, he reached behind his back, pulled out a crushed bouquet of roses, and said through clenched teeth, "Claire Bennett, I know what you saw. Let me explain. Please." And for once, I didn't interrupt. I didn't know what stunned me more, Ryan sitting there with his knee clearly injured, or the bouquet in his hand, a little crushed, petals already wilting at the edges like it had been carried around for hours waiting for the right moment. And maybe this wasn't the way he planned it. Maybe he wasn't supposed to get hurt mid-game, or maybe he wasn't even supposed to confess today, but here he was, bruised and breathless, with those brown eyes locked onto mine like I was the only thing that still made sense. And despite everything, despite the mystery girl's texts, the suspicious photos, the whole were fake but not really thing, I didn't run. I didn't push his hands away. I just stood there holding back tears while he knelt in pain and said, "Claire, I know you saw her messages. I know you're hurt. But I swear, on everything that matters, I have nothing to do with her. I never replied. I never asked her to come. And I already told her not to show up again." And his voice cracked a little at the end, like the weight of finally saying it out loud was too much. And he didn't wait for me to speak, just reached out, not for my hand, but to place the roses gently at my feet like it was an apology in bloom, and then he smiled, weak and nervous and beautiful in the most pathetic way. "You saw me that day on the court, remember? When the ball almost hit you, and I caught it behind your head?" I nodded slowly, memories flashing back, and he added, "That was the first time I saw you. And I don't know what it was, maybe the way you rolled your eyes after your roommate fangirled over me, or how unimpressed you looked, but I swear I thought, yeah, that's the girl I want to chase." And I was already blinking fast, trying to keep the tears from falling because who says things like that while holding back pain and bleeding through their knee brace? And he took a shaky breath, glanced down at the roses, then back at me. "Claire Bennett, we've known each other for 7 months and 13 days, and for all 7 months, I've been pretending we were something casual, something undefined, because I was too scared you'd say it was just fake, that we were just acting, but I can't pretend anymore. So, if you're willing, will you stop pretending with me and be my girlfriend for real?" And it wasn't a fancy proposal. There was no music, no spotlight, no stadium flash mob, just him on one knee, smelling like sweat and panic, with a bouquet that was dying as fast as my self-control, and I broke, not in a dramatic sobbing way, but in the way you do when something just makes perfect sense all of a sudden, and I crouched down, took the roses from his hand, and said softly, "Didn't I already answer that during my class presentation?" And he stared at me for a beat before bursting into a grin so wide I could see all his teeth, but that smile disappeared instantly as he tried to stand and realized his leg wouldn't cooperate, and I freaked out a little when I saw the color drain from his face. "Wait, are you okay? What's wrong with your leg?" And he winced, groaning, "I think I sprained it worse than I thought," which is when I realized he had literally proposed to me with an injured leg, kneeling the whole time, not because it was romantic, but because he physically couldn't stand, and the guilt hit me like a truck. "Oh my God, you're insane, why didn't you say something?" And he just shrugged, trying to act cool. The moment felt right. Kind of ruined the vibe to say I was dying, and I grabbed his arm and helped him up, not caring how sweaty or gross we both were, and we made our way to the campus hospital together, me carrying his backpack, him limping like a soldier who just came back from war, and once we got him on the bed, he relaxed a little, letting the nurse ice his knee and wrap it, and the whole time he didn't stop staring at me, which made me blush like a middle schooler, so I tried to change the subject and asked, "What did I look like the day you fell in love at first sight?" And without missing a beat, he said, "You were standing under the bleachers, wearing that oversized beige hoodie that made you look like a marshmallow. Your hair was messy, like you hadn't brushed it, and you were holding a grape soda." And I blinked, shocked he remembered something that specific, and he smiled again. "Your eyes were squinting from the sun, but they still sparkled, and when you smiled at your roommate, your whole face lit up." I thought, I want someone to smile at me like that. And okay, I'll admit it. That one made me tear up because no one's ever remembered me like that before, and maybe I never thought I was the kind of girl someone would fall in love with at first sight, but hearing him say it, remembering those little things, it made me believe that maybe I was more special than I ever gave myself credit for. And he reached for my hand and pulled me gently onto the hospital bed beside him, letting me lean against him, and then asked, "When did you fall for me?" And my mind spun through every moment we'd shared, him changing my contact name, his mom calling me auntie-in-law, our fake couple photos, him shielding me from Professor Carter's glares, and even the ridiculous open crotch photo, and I couldn't pick just one. So I said, "I think it was every little moment," added together, like a slow drip that just filled up over time, and that seemed to satisfy him because he gave me this look, soft, kind of stunned, like he couldn't believe I said that, and leaned in to kiss my forehead, but the second his lips touched my skin, he tensed up and jerked away like he'd touched a stove, and I was about to ask what was wrong when he pulled the blanket over his legs, eyes wide, face red, and wouldn't look at me. And I realized something was up, so I reached for the blanket, but he gripped it like his life depended on it, and when I tried again, more confused than ever, Annie walked into the room with a thermos of chicken soup and said cheerily, "Claire, don't pull. Dinner's almost ready, you'll light the fire early." And I was just sitting there frozen, like, what fire? What soup? What was she talking about? But then I glanced down, and oh my God, I finally understood what he was hiding under that blanket, and I wanted to die and laugh and scream all at once. and I turned to look at Ryan, who was now hiding under the covers like a turtle, and I couldn't even be mad because I was the one who caused it, sitting so close, leaning on him, making it worse. And Annie just casually left the room like she hadn't just dropped a bomb. And I wanted to disappear into the hospital floor, but he peeked out from under the blanket and muttered, "It's not my fault, okay? You were being too cute." And I hit him with a pillow. "You're the one who invited me into the bed." And he groaned. I was being romantic, not suicidal, and we both laughed until we were out of breath, and the tension broke like a popped balloon. And that night, even with all the awkwardness, the injuries, the soup, and the nosebleeds, I knew I had fallen so hard for this ridiculous, sweet, earnest boy who once faked a relationship with me and now didn't have to pretend anymore. The hospital incident should have been the peak of awkwardness between us, but somehow, after that utterly mortifying moment with the blanket and the fire-starting chicken soup, things between me and Ryan only got weirder in the most domestic, soft, heart-melting kind of way. Like I'd somehow been upgraded from fake girlfriend to full-time emotional support human. And even though he didn't technically need to be hospitalized anymore, I still found myself visiting his place almost every evening, showing up with his assignments, grabbing him bubble tea on the way, or sometimes just to sit on his bed while he scrolled aimlessly through his phone with one arm lazily looped around me, like it was the most natural thing in the world, like we'd been doing it for years. And I should have felt overwhelmed or maybe even annoyed, but honestly, it felt right. Like I'd finally found the place where I didn't have to explain myself or pretend to be the version of Claire that people expected, and his parents especially. Auntie had gone from treating me like a delightful surprise to full-on daughter-in-law trial mode, constantly asking if I liked the dishes she made, or if Ryan had been treating me right, and of course, she was still the queen of wildly inappropriate timing, like the night I brought over some extra worksheets for him, and she leaned over the dinner table mid-stew and said, "If you two ever plan to give me grandkids, please don't wait until I'm too old to babysit." And I nearly choked on my water while Ryan turned beet red and pretended he didn't hear it, but despite all of it, the chaos, the teasing, the overfeeding, I grew comfortable with it, with us, and somewhere in between reviewing his lecture notes and helping him limp across campus, I forgot that this all started with me lying in class under his name, and I started believing that maybe this was real, like truly, genuinely real, until one Friday morning when I had Professor Carter's class again, and Ryan, still half recovering, decided to walk me there, just because, even though his ankles still hadn't fully healed, and I kept telling him he was going to make it worse, but he said it was worth it to see the look on my face when I got called on unexpectedly, which, by the way, happened every single time I had his dad's class, and as expected, halfway through the lecture, Professor Carter narrowed his eyes at me, then at Ryan sitting in the back, then cleared his throat and said, "Claire Bennett, since your boyfriend has joined us today, I assume he's caught up on my syllabus?" And I froze in place, mouthing no at Ryan, who smiled innocently and said, "Of course," and before I could stop him, he was dragging his chair up beside me and volunteering to do an impromptu English to computer science cross-discipline presentation like he was gunning for extra credit, and he killed it, like absolutely nailed it, and I should have been impressed. But all I could think about was how smug he looked, how he winked at me every time he said something clever, how he signed off his little monologue with, "And this is all thanks to the endless support of my amazing girlfriend." And the class went wild, clapping and cheering, and Professor Carter sighed so loudly I could feel it in my bones. But even he looked like he was struggling not to smile, and just when I thought we were finally out of the woods, he raised an eyebrow and said, "Ms. Bennett, I hope you're aware that skipping class has consequences, regardless of personal relationships." And I immediately panicked, thinking he had found out about that one time Ryan and I bailed to go eat tacos, but instead, he handed me a folder and said, "You'll be my student assistant for the rest of the semester. Consider it penance." And I just stood there blinking while Ryan whispered, "Congrats on the promotion." Like he hadn't just volunteered me for free labor, but honestly, I didn't mind, because that meant more time in his orbit, and maybe I was already too far gone, because every time I saw him now, even in sweatpants and messy hair, I got butterflies, and things stayed sweet and chaotic like that for a while, until one afternoon, during another of his games, I brought the usual towel and drink like always, but right after the match ended and he jogged over to grab them for me, I noticed a girl standing a few feet away watching us, her arms crossed, eyes sharp, and her gaze was glued on me, not him, and I recognized her instantly. It was the same girl who had sent those flirty texts during that disaster of a week when Ryan confessed, and she was still here, still watching, but this time there was no mistaking the look on her face. It was jealousy, laced with something more bitter, and I wasn't about to start drama in public, so I kept quiet, smiled tightly, and focused on Ryan. But later, as we were packing up, she approached me alone near the lockers, her voice syrupy but her eyes cold. "You know he used to flirt with me, right? Before you came along." And I felt my chest tighten, not because I believed her, but because there was always that tiny insecure part of me whispering, "You were a substitute, remember? You were never supposed to stay." And she continued, "It's cute how you act like you're special, like this is something real." And maybe old Claire would have walked away, too scared to defend herself. But this Claire, this version of me that Ryan helped build back up, straightened her shoulders and said, "If you have something to say it to him. Because I know where I stand, and I don't need your version of the past to validate what I have now." And I didn't wait for her reply, just walked away and texted Ryan, "Come outside." And when he showed up, hair damp from the post-game shower, smile ready to greet me, I asked him point blank, "Did you ever lead her on?" And he blinked, surprised, then shook his head immediately. "Claire, I swear I didn't. She was in the fan group chat. Maybe I responded to something once, but I never flirted, never promised anything, and I sure as hell didn't ask her to come today." And I believed him, not because he said it perfectly, but because his eyes were steady and his hands were warm when he reached for mine, and he said, "The only person I've ever tried to get to stay is you." And that was the moment I realized no one could undo what we had now. Not a girl with old screenshots, not a professor with a pointer stick, not even the me from 6 months ago who didn't believe I was worthy of being loved like this. And that night, as we lay on the couch watching replays of the game with his leg propped up on my lap and Andy bringing us mango pudding she'd made, just in case we got hungry, I looked at Ryan, at the way he glanced at me every few seconds like I might disappear if he looked away too long, and I smiled, because this was real. And I was done pretending. I used to think the most embarrassing moment of my life would forever be tied to that photo of Ryan in open-crotch pants, or maybe the hospital soup situation where I literally overheated myself into a nosebleed. But I was wrong, because nothing, and I mean nothing, could top the feeling of raising my hand during class when Professor Carter called Ryan Carter during roll call, and I instinctively shot my hand up like a reflex, forgetting I wasn't his stand-in anymore, and the whole class turned to stare as I panicked mid-motion, tried to play it off with a smile, and said, "I'm his girlfriend, he'll be limping in shortly." And just as if on cue, Ryan hobbled into the lecture hall with a brace on his leg, giving me a thumbs up like we were in some low-budget sitcom, and instead of being mad, Professor Carter just sighed deeply, dramatically, and muttered, "I should have retired last year." And at this point, I didn't even bother feeling guilty anymore, because the truth was, this whole mess, this tangled web of substitute attendance, fake dating, fake not fake family dinners, and accidental real feelings had somehow become the most honest thing in my life. And every time Ryan smiled at me across a crowded room or sent me a dumb emoji just to say hi, or limped all the way across campus just to surprise me with a chai latte, I was reminded that even the most unexpected beginnings can turn into something breathtaking if you let them. And the more time I spent around his family, the more it started feeling like a weirdly perfect second home, with Annie treating me like her own daughter and randomly texting me photos of baby Ryan or links to recipes I should try to keep his appetite up, while Professor Carter, though still terrifying in class, had softened significantly and once even called me young lady instead of Mess Bennett, which, coming from him, was basically a fatherly embrace. And then there was Ryan, who never stopped showing up, never stopped being the boy who turned a lie into love. The one who remembered what I wore the day we met, who printed our blurry group photo from the basketball match and snuck it onto the Carter family photo wall, right under the baby picture, who kept calling me Claire Bear, even though I threatened to sue him for emotional damage, who made sure I ate on stressful days, who played songs I loved while he studied, and who, slowly but surely, carved out a space for me in every corner of his world until one day it didn't feel like I was visiting Anna Marie, it felt like I belonged. And maybe that's why, when the time came for him to fully recover and start playing competitively again, I didn't even hesitate when he asked if I'd come watch him, even though I had 3 essays due and a project hanging over my head, because I remembered how he once knelt in pain just to confess to me. So now I stood in the bleachers again, this time not as a clueless classmate or a reluctant fake girlfriend, but as someone who knew his schedule by heart, who brought the exact towel he liked, who made sure the sports drink was the right temperature, and when the game ended and he won, and the entire crowd was cheering, he jogged toward me with the biggest grin, pulled me onto the court, and whispered, "Can I kiss you in front of everyone, or will that get me benched?" And I laughed so hard I nearly dropped the towel, but before I could answer, he kissed me anyway right there, in front of half the school, with our teammates cheering and his coach pretending not to notice. And for once, I didn't care about appearances or rumors or what anyone else might think, because in that moment, it was just us, messy and loud and imperfect and incredibly real. And later that night, back at his house, when I was helping Annie chop vegetables while Ryan sorted through the mail, she looked over at me and smiled so warmly it made my chest ache. "You know, Claire, I never expected you to be the girl my son would bring home, but now that you're here, I can't imagine him with anyone else." And I looked down, cheeks flushing, mumbling something like, "I didn't expect it either." But deep down I knew I'd never felt more certain about anything, and just as we were finishing up dinner, Professor Carter walked into the kitchen and pointed at me with his usual stern expression. "I heard you got the highest grade in your literature analysis," and I nodded cautiously, unsure if this was going somewhere terrifying, but then he added with a tiny smirk, "Ryan must be luckier around. Don't let him drag you down." And Ryan, from across the room, shouted, "Hey, I'm the reason she even studied for that test." And I rolled my eyes. "You were sleeping on the textbook, Ryan." And everyone laughed, and suddenly it hit me that this life, the Carter family chaos, the classes, the basketball games, the stolen forehead kisses, the warm soup, and even warmer teasing was no longer just some elaborate cover story. It was mine. It was ours. And later, as we sat on the rooftop of the dorms, legs dangling over the edge, Ryan leaned into me, his fingers playing with mine, and said, "I never thought someone would stick around this long, you know? I always figured people would get tired of me." And I turned to him and whispered, "Well, too bad. You're stuck with me now." And he chuckled, brushing my hair behind my ear. "Good. Because I never planned to let you go." And just like that, with the wind in my face and the stars scattered above us, I knew we were no longer pretending, not even a little bit, because what started as a favor, a white lie in a classroom full of strangers, had somehow turned into the greatest thing I never saw coming. And if I could go back in time to that first awkward roll call, I wouldn't change a thing. Not the panic, not the fake title, not even the baby photo, because it all led me here, sitting beside the boy who once needed a stand-in and found a soulmate instead.